I'm going to make a very short presentation, then I will introduce my fellow panelists. So we're talking about the impact of screens and phones, and this really became a thing and has made such a massive impact since the pandemic. So the pandemic hit and everything changed, and then we feel like things got back to normal, only they absolutely didn't. One of my young people that I see put it perfectly. He said to me, I went into my room at the pandemic. Before that, I was really social. I was going out. We were going down the beach. We were seeing loads of people. I went into my room on my screen, and I never came out. And since then, I've had depression, anxiety, and then ultimately thoughts of suicide. So we really need to understand the impact of the pandemic when we think about the issue of screen and phone use. So it impacts our brain development, behavior, there's exploitation, addiction, concentration issues, academic performance, mental health issues, and unwanted content from online content. And the average teen receives 237 smartphone notifications a day. And those young people who spend more than 2 hours a day on screens show that they have lower academic performance. Sexual crimes have increased by 400%. And the first generations to grow up with smartphones are experiencing much higher mental health challenges, dependent upon the age they first got their smartphone. So it's really stark. This is just like my experience. This is my guilty secret. I love watching people redirect sharks. Okay? Look, I don't know why, don't ask me why, so I'm browsing for 5 minutes, watching this lovely woman redirect sharks, this lovely man, whoever he is. And I thought, I'll just click on his Instagram page. First time I've ever done it, never done it before, first time. And I see this on the right, with these two faces of Momo. And Momo is synonymous with a suicide pact game, that you go through stages of dares online, and the last dare is to kill yourself by suicide. And this was a major thing back in the earlier 2000s online. It was huge in the UK, and a number of people died by suicide because of this. So of course I wrote to the people to say take it down. They didn't. But imagine if my 5-year-old had been on my phone and clicked on it and seen that. She already has nightmares at times. She's already sensitive to stuff and threat. This was terrifying to me. I thought, I don't spend much time on my phone. I can't believe that this had happened. So it feels so important with the research coming out that we start to really talk about this. And so it is my absolute pleasure to introduce 3 eminent experts on this island on this topic. We have Dr. Laurence, who is a clinical child psychologist with expertise in neuropsychology. She's from Kidsability. We have Dr. Anand, Yelne, a paediatrician and neonatologist from Health City, Cayman Islands. And we have Ms. Charmaine Miller, clinical supervisor and curator of many, many things at the Family Resource Centre. It's my pleasure to welcome them onto the stage. Please do come up and join me. So, without further ado, Dr. Laurence, hi, welcome. It's lovely to have you here. So I know that this is a particular topic of passion for you, and I'm really interested in your perspective. What do we know about screen time and brain development?
Okay, so I think before I answer that question, I really do want to take everyone through a little bit about brain development, because I think we need to understand that in order to understand the impact of screen time. We can say it's bad for the brain, but if we don't know why, oh God, I just saw the timer. Okay.
We're good, don't worry about it. Got plenty of time.
If we don't know why, then it becomes harder to implement any changes. So basically, when a baby is born full term, the brain is actually only 25% developed. So when a baby is born, it's born with the foundations of what then gets built. So we're born with a genetical foundation, and the environment is actually the architect. The environment is the architect of the brain that creates what it can do later on. So 25% at birth, 70% at the age of 1, only 85% at the age of 3, At the age of 5, it's 92%. The age of 10 is 98%. And it's only 100% developed at 25. And now they're actually saying it's later, and in boys it's even later. I don't know why, but... So basically, there's a concept in neuropsychology, which is fire together, wire together. So how is this brain built, right? So we know 25%, but how do we get to 100%? And that's because every single thing that a child and an infant and a baby does creates pathways in the brain. So we're firing together, and these areas are wiring together, and they're getting thicker and denser and more connected, and then suddenly they can start doing more and more and more in that area. So if we look at walking, a baby doesn't get born walking. A baby's born and can't do very much. So it starts by making neural pathways to lift its head, and then to roll, and then to sit, and then to crawl, and then to stand, and then to wobble, and then to fall, and then to do it again. And that whole process to where a baby can get to, or an infant gets to where they can run, is about 1.5 years. So if you think, that neural pathway just to get to running took 1.5 years. So it takes a lot of experience in the environment, interaction with the environment, to build all these pathways. So now let's look at something as simple as writing. Okay, so at the age of 4 or 5, you go to school, you're expected to start forming letters. The precursor to that is what's important, because that part of the brain needs to be built to a certain degree to be able to substantiate that. So now we have kids who are swiping screens. Okay, so they're not using pincer grip, they're not putting blocks together, and they're not fitting things together, and they're not holding a pencil or a thick crayon and starting to do big, bold brush strokes, and then go smaller and smaller, more and more precise. Those are the parts of the brains that now get wired together to support writing. But that's not happening as much anymore. So now we're seeing a rise in dysgraphia, which I see a lot in my practice, because those neural pathways aren't there to support the writing. So we need to seriously think. There's 2 things that happen. I'm going to talk about the second bit in a second. The first thing we need to think about, if our kids are on these screens, what are they not doing? So what experience are they not having? It takes about 10,000 hours to become good at something. 10,000 hours. So think about a kid who's on a screen for 4 or 5 hours a day. They're not engaging with the environment to be able to set them up to have the skills to do well at school or in the environment or in the world. A little baby, I often see them on screens in strollers, and it churns my stomach, because what they're not doing is serve and return. So serve and return is where they do an action or something, they drop something, and then they get a reaction. And from all those interactions with the environment, the brain learns. And the brain learns how to be social and what to expect when a voice is raised or a certain mimic of a face or body expression. They pick that up because they're watching. But these kids aren't watching anymore. So the brain isn't learning. And so then you get the teenagers who really struggle socially because they're not interpreting social communication properly. So you get an increase in social pragmatic communication disorder, which we're seeing a lot of, and autism symptoms. So things that genetically they might not have had, but it's getting created because this brain isn't getting developed the way it should. So for me, and that's why I am so passionate about this, because understanding the brain helps me to understand the damage that we're actually doing by allowing our kids on screens for prolonged periods of time. So I'm not against screens. I'm pro-intentional use and pro the understanding of the length of time they can be on it so that they spend a lot of time doing the other things as well. So use it or lose it is another concept in neuroscience. So if we're not working those pathways, if we're not using it, we're actually losing density in those pathways. And then it becomes, when you get older, a lot harder to build on that. So research shows that now the white matter of the brain is a lot less developed in kids. And this is the interesting part. So they're saying who go on screens over a prescribed amount of time. So say the hour is prescribed. These kids are doing 1.5 hours. And already between the kids under an hour and over 1.5 hours, you see white matter density differences. And so white matter is what connects the different parts of the brain and helps us with our language and reading and thinking and critical decision making. And so already there's a huge difference that we're seeing. And then if I have another second, do I?
Yeah, you do.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So the prefrontal cortex for me is a very important part. So this is what we see in kids with ADHD. So The frontal cortex, prefrontal cortex, houses our executive functions, our attention, our focus, our inhibition, our planning and organization, our emotional regulation, and our ability to deal with frustration. And so that is actually only fully developed at the age of 25, 26, 27, whatever the research now shows. So that's really weak. Now what happens, the second part of what I wanted to talk about is when you're on a screen and it's super exciting, and it's always exciting because they keep doing updates to keep it exciting because they know exactly what they're marketing towards, right? Addiction. So you've got something super exciting on the screen. What happens in the brain is the emotional part of the brain lights up. Dopamine gets released. Dopamine is what makes us motivated, which makes us want to do more. So it's addictive. But the interesting part is what we know from MRI studies is that when the emotional part of the brain lights up, the prefrontal cortex dims down. And it's like an on and off switch. So when we're extremely emotional, think about the moments that you're super angry with your kid or your spouse or something, and they try and reason with you. You just can't reason. You have to calm down first, right? That's because the frontal lobe, they say, if this is the emotional part of the brain and that's the prefrontal cortex, you flip your lid. So when that's on, the emotion, frontal lobe switches off, and vice versa. So here are kids on a device, super into it, so their emotional part of the brain is getting fired. Now the frontal part of the brain isn't working as much. Fire together, wire together, use it or lose it, right? So this part of the brain that's already pretty underdeveloped isn't working. So we're not firing together. So that part gets weaker. And that's why we see the kids with the emotional dysregulation. They get off their electronics and they're completely dysregulated. We get kids who struggle with their attention. Impulse control is hugely impacted. Frustration intolerance is hugely impacted. So these are the things, and Dr. Anand will talk about it too, that we're actually seeing clinically. We're seeing things that mimic ADHD, autism, social pragmatic communication disorder, where genetically they probably weren't preempted for that, but because of the way the screens are impacting their brain, we're starting to see this more.
So what I hear you're saying is that because screen time, phone use, whatever guise that takes, is interrupting the creation of neural pathways, it's stopping our children from developing the skills, the abilities, the social abilities, the emotional regulation, and the attentional abilities they need in order to manage as adults in the real world.
Also to manage in school.
Right. To manage in school. That is, it's affecting every single part of a young person's skill range. That's enormous.
It is.
So thank you so much for that. It's incredibly informative. And I know there's an awful lot of information to take in there.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh no, thank you for bringing that to our attention. That's really important. Let me come on to you then, Dr. Anand.
Yes.
So, given the brain development impact that we've heard about,
right,
as a paediatrician, what are your concerns in particular for preschool-aged children?
As Dr. Laurence says, that the brain development starts from the mother's womb, as well as it keep on increasing, growing till the age of 5. So it is important to notice that the milestones development, especially like speech and motor development, as well as cognitive development, intelligence, extrovertness, these are all dependent on the environmental factors as well as the parental supporting or caregiver supporting. Once the screen is introduced to them, it is challenging to take them out of the screen and interact with the environment, because the most important learning factor during the child development, during child brain development, is the environment. The real environment, not a virtual environment. The real environment is made by the real outside games, interaction with the parents, as well as interaction with the peer groups. So they should get interest in developing their senses. For example, if we consider the speech is a two-way process. We are sitting together here, we are have a panel discussion, we are communicate with each other with the help of speech. If the screen is there, the screen is a one-way process. When they are looking at the cartoons, or even if we consider it as a child education program, which is now available from 2 years to 5 years of age, it is all over the world, all over the screen. Parents often say that my child is learning through the screen because we have the child education program in that. But it is important to notice that while doing that program, the parents should be accompanied with them, because once the screen is introduced to the child brain, they have the command over the screen. If they don't like the screen, for example, one content is not liked by them, they will flip, they will change with them. That means they are in command of the screen. They feel that they are the superpower. As well as especially the brain development during the first year of life to second year of life, the autonomy increases and then it decreases. That's why the temper tantrums are specifically introduced to the child at the age of 1, and these keep on increasing. If we introduce the screen at the age of 1 year, less than 2 years, less than 3 years, then they develop that autonomy in an aggressive manner. Once the command is away from them, they will try to achieve that command. That's why it takes the frustration. And they don't want to interact with that person. For example, they don't want to interact with mother, father, because they think that they are opposite to me. They are not willing to do what I want to do. That is why the temper tantrum aggression increases, as well as the incidence of autism and ADHD has been tremendously increased once the screen time is introduced to them, especially during the pandemic period. There is one study, Yelne study, from 2020, they have catered the more than 2,000 babies up to 2024. It's published last year only. They said that earlier it was considered as a screen time is not a causative factor for the autism or ADHD. Now, they are definitely, with confidence, they can say that it's one of the etiological factor. Although the more studies to be need, but obviously, the ADHD incidence has been increased with the help because of screen time. Because the ADHD, it's all the aggression behavior, attention gaining behavior, and they are learning through the screen how to get that behavior, how to get that thing. Once the internet addiction is there, they are glued to the screen, they are glued to the mobile, so that they think that small gadget is my world. They make their own world. And once even the parents, even the caregivers, the most important person of their life, they want to break that command, they will become aggressive. That is the most important thing we tend to consider. The only screen time which is allowed, we said that, okay, screen is one of the revolution, as well as it one of the factors that we can educate our child, as well as they become cool, they become good. But the only allowable screen time is to interacting with the video calling with their parents, grandparents, or dear and near ones. Otherwise, it is duration fixed. The duration between, there should not be any screen time less than 2 years. From 2 years to 3 years, there can be the screen time of half hour with the help of interaction, not the one-way process. From 2 years to 5 years, the screen time is increased up to 1 hour. But it has to be associated with parents, not a single person. Why important? Parents should be beside the child, because they can break the system, they can break the one-way conversation, they can break the glued, means it doesn't allow to make their own world, so that it will be the more interactive. So that the leadership qualities as well as the team leader or extrovert qualities has been greatly impaired with the screen time.
Wow, there is so much there, and I think what really stands out to me is the links you're making between screen time and the difficulties with over-diagnosis of ADHD and autism spectrum conditions. And it sounds like the research is now showing that there is a direct link between those two things.
Right.
And so we really need to reduce. And you've said that really there should be no screen time before the age of 2. And I'm going to come back to you on that. But first of all, I want to ask Ms. Charmaine, based on what we're hearing, first of all, do we need to regain power over this? And if we do, how do we start to get power back?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, navigating parenthood has never been an easy task. And now we are living in this digital space where we have to manage social media, technology, smartphones, all of it in once, and it's incredibly challenging for our parents. So at the Family Resource Center, what we see is oftentimes parents that are coming in with several parenting challenges, and the link of that, or all of it, is really stemming from lack of boundaries or limit setting as it pertains to screen time, right? So I want parents to understand here today that you're not alone. You're not alone in this issue. And yes, we have our standard guidelines. Some of us have given excessively amount of screen time, right? But it doesn't mean that it's too late, that you can't take control of your ship. That's really important. As parents, I'm a mom. I experience, even though in my profession, there's shame and guilt associated with that too, right? We recognize that sometimes we're using it as our next babysitter, as an opportunity for ourselves to even indulge in it, as well as just, pick up on personal interests or just decompress or cope for whatever reason. So note that you're not alone in that. But to the question of regaining our regaining our authority, 3 key things that I want you to leave with today is the idea of connection, balance, and consistency. All right, when we're thinking about regaining that authority, it begins through connecting. We talk about, I talked to my son yesterday, he's a teenager, and we're talking about, I'm going to do this panel tomorrow. What's one thing that you think parents need to do more of? Right? I'm always vetting my work through him. And so he's like, trust. Let's talk more about that, right? So it's the idea of trusting our children, but earned trust too. That concept there is super important. If we're going to create some restrictions in our home, which is absolutely critical, it needs to be done in a way that it doesn't become extremely combative. We're hearing all the concerns. We understand it. We understand the impact that it's having on a child's development, on a child's academic performance, on their social skills and inability to engage with other peers because they're used to doing that so much over screens. But also the impact that it's having on our parent-child relationship is crucial. How many of you wonder, and you reflect on your week, how has my week been today? Oh my God, all I feel is that I've been arguing with my child or my teenager on how much time they're spending on screens, right? So a lot of that is coming up for us. And so if we're going to restrict and regain some of that authority, a lot of it has to do with what are we going to do with that time? How can we improve our quality time with our kids? Getting back to the basic of things while also recognizing, depending on their age and appropriateness, how can we also be invited into that tech space, right? Into that digital world so that there's some interest to it. There's some platforms, I know Dr. Basson and I, we've talked about it, it's absolutely a no-no. We should not engage in that because it's completely inappropriate. But there are others that certainly, there's some value to it. There's some value of understanding why our kids are interested in that. And so some of us here today, after you're done listening to this panel, you're going to think about, well, how do I adjust my parenting style and go from where I'm at right now? There are gradual changes that need to be made. We may have been extremely too lenient, right? We've given just kind of a blanket, just open approach towards just using screen time during your morning routine, car rides, after school, and so there's that disconnection that's happening. And when there's a lot of disconnection in a relationship, what happens is our teenagers particularly are at risk. They're extremely vulnerable because they're sharing that information in other spaces, most importantly in that digital space, where that vulnerability is not respected and is taken advantage of, right? So try to think about how can you be less lenient and reclaim some of that authority by making small changes without going full-on drastic with it. Because what will happen, the older our kids are, it's going to become a huge control battle, and it becomes extremely problematic. If you've been extremely strict also, think about how you can show some digital freedom. Your child has earned trust now, right? And based on their appropriateness and age, how can you give them some digital freedom, but keyword with structure? Freedom that you can live with, freedom that you can supervise to some extent while still giving them some trust. Another concept that's really, really important that we try to convey to our parents is role modeling. Role modeling the behaviors that we want to see. Being a good example, being a good digital citizen online. I don't know how many of you have heard of the concept of screen sharing or shared parent sharenting. That's the idea of, when I became a mom, obviously, social media was a thing, and I wanted to celebrate parenthood. I shared a lot of what was going on for my son developmentally, right? Now, our children today are seeing that, right? And we talked about earlier on grooming, consent, the value of consent. So now when I decide to share, I'm asking for permission. Mason, is it okay for me to share this video? I'm just blown away by how cool you are at playing basketball, right? So it's the idea of also being really good models of how we engage with social media. And also take a look this week, at the end of this week, and look at your screen time. How much time have you spent online, right? How much time have you spent just scrolling? First thing in the morning, you wake up, kids are storming in, and you're kind of like trying to hide that phone because you also want to be a really good example, right? But look at what we're doing also and recognizing how can we cut back, how can we curtail on our screen time so that we can be more present for our children. Last but not least, I want to talk about digital responsibility, because it's really important to teach our kids to be good digital citizens, right? Especially recognizing all the dangers that are online. We recently rolled out a program in October in celebration of Anti-Bullying Prevention Month, and it's called Teen Safety. And we were surprised by how our schools just soaked it all in and demanded and pretty much requested for us to go into their schools to run this workshop that focused on red flags of, screen time and how to respond to that. The beauty of this program is that it's not only speaking to our teenagers or our children on how to stay safe online, but also parents. There's a huge disconnect. We don't know how much our kids are being exposed to things online consistently, right? So it's super important that we begin to become familiar with that. Get online, navigate these platforms a little bit more, do your research, access resources like FRC if you choose to. Learn a little bit more of what your child is being exposed to so that you can protect them too, right? So the idea of becoming digital citizens is not only demanding and telling your child, absolutely not, you can't access that. Explain the why. We're talking about teenagers, they are now critical thinkers. They want to be independent. It's not just yes or no, right? They want to understand the concepts behind that. So educate them on that so that they can make really good decisions for themselves also when you're not around.
Thank you so much. And I want to add in something that I really learned as a parent. So when I talk about this topic, I tend to talk as a mother rather than as a psychologist because I'm so passionate about this for my two girls. They're only 9 and 5. And what I learned was the importance of boredom for them. So I used to be really worried about them getting bored. And then suddenly we banned YouTube in our house when I started to learn about the impact of screens on brain development. And what I realized was how important it was for them to say, Mummy, I'm bored. And I would say, okay, well, I wonder what's going to happen in that time. And they would roll their eyes at me and be like, Mom. But within 5 minutes, they were doing something super cool. And I'd be like, wow. And when I researched it, they were actually developing frustration tolerance and resilience in those moments because they've got to get through a feeling of discomfort. And what loads of parents are saying to me is, my child is not resilient. And I think part of it is because we're not making them get through frustrations like boredom. And so I think boredom is incredibly important, but I also want to acknowledge some of the hidden elephants here. One of those things is the impossible situation we have been put in by big tech companies. We didn't know this until we knew it. We have been put in an impossible situation. And I do not want any parent here to go away feeling guilty about this because we did not know, me included. I've been rock climbing up a rock and my child has been sat at the bottom on a screen. Okay, and that was not okay. All right. And then the other thing is the importance of acknowledging the impossible role of the woman here, of the mother, because we have got to look after our homes. We are working full time. We're cooking. We are cleaning. We are shopping. We are supposed to then raise well-rounded children and then keep them off screens. I mean, that is, no, right. So let's also have a massive dose of self-compassion around this. So, on that note, I just want to come back to each of you to ask you, if there is one thing you want people to go away with, what is that, please, Dr. Laurence?
Yeah, I find that hard to answer briefly.
Absolutely.
But I think I mentioned it earlier, just the idea of pro-intentional use, which I think is what we're all kind of saying. So to really think, what is happening here? So what is a child developing towards if I'm doing a certain behavior or letting them on a screen for a certain amount of time? I think the most important thing is the psychoeducation part, and even to your child, to psychoeducate them on why you're limiting it, so they can understand. And I think having a good conversation about it and saying, okay, things are going to change a little bit, and these are the reasons why. Even when they're young, you can do that because they'll understand it if you do it in the simplest terms.
Okay, thank you so much. That is really an important message for us to take home. Dr. Anand, over to you. What's the one thing you really want people to take away from today?
Yeah, certainly I will say that the emotional bonding is the most important part between the child and their parents. If we think that, who is your superhero? For example, if you ask the question to the 6-year-old child, or even more, then nowadays they will say that my superhero is Iron Man. Oh, that's not good, right? Earlier, when I was a child, I used to say that my superhero is my father. My superheroine is my mother. Why? Because the emotional bonding, trusting, is developed while you spending the time with the parents, with children, and then they should know that if anything happened wrong, there are people around me that will save my life, my all things. That is called as resilient. Means, as Dr. Lockhart says, that the mental health is more important than the physical health. How we can build up that mental health? By trusting on your child. Child should trust on you, as well as the emotional bonding should be super strong, so that they will get attached to it. It actually, for the children, it is actually a mental support that has to be forever till the death of their parents. And the best part to develop it right from the 2 years of age till the teenager or their graduation. You just don't let them go away from you, or you always support them mentally.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anand. That's a very powerful statement. And Ms. Charmaine, your final thoughts.
Intentionality, being intentional in your day-to-day with your children in terms of spending time with them. We heard about emotional bonding, and I'll piggyback on that. That parent-child relationship is the #1 predictor to the success of your child, right? And if we're able to be intentional, and sometimes that'll include, intentionality means in the same way we structure our lovely meetings on a daily basis, we need to structure some time consistently to get to know our child, to understand what's going on for them, their highs, their lows, all the challenges that they're experiencing. And whilst our teenagers, we have oftentimes parents that'll say, they don't want to talk to me. I've tried, I'm getting the door shut on me. Continue to be there, because even if they don't want to, eventually they'll have those moments where they want to connect and they know that you're present, and so that security is extremely important.
Thank you so much. Again, an incredibly important message. So mine is, please join us. We have set up the first WhatsApp group. I understand the irony in this because I'm using social media. It doesn't bypass me. Please join our WhatsApp community, the Smartphone-Free Childhood Cayman. Big tech are strong in this world. They're powerful, but they are not as powerful as mothers and fathers when we join together. So I'm going to ask you to please join our WhatsApp community. Because I'm so lame on social media, I probably managed to put a post on this about once every 10 days. So you're not going to get inundated, is my message. But what I will say is we are going to use this platform to look at smartphone parent pacts, to try and help parents delay giving their children smartphones until the age of 15, if possible. We're going to work alongside different NPOs and the ministry to look at how we look at this in schools. We're going to work alongside schools to help to see what we can do to delay and to stop smartphones being in schools as much as they are. So please join us to help with that and to get ideas and to share strength. There is no judgment on this platform. Okay, so with that, we have got 4 minutes and 42 seconds for question and answers. So if anybody wants to ask any of our panel members anything, please do so. Any questions? Yes, please, if you've got a question. Oh, we've got somebody with a mic. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. My question is for anybody on the panel. I won't throw it at Charmaine. She'll not like me after. But if the emphasis that Dr. Anand, I think, is his name, and you made in terms of what Dr. Lockhart said in relation to mental versus physical health, and considering that our child abuse law indicates that failure to prevent injury through neglectful actions, are we there yet as it relates to this issue that we have? Because, Doc, you mentioned the idea of the different ramifications of this, not being intentional, and when you're not being intentional, you're really being neglectful. Now, to the parents in the room, please don't ostracize me. I'm just saying, are we there where the things that are happening, the things that we're seeing in the doctor's office, are we there yet to say this needs to be something that's a part of our child protection policy?
That is a really great question. Does this need to be part of a child protection policy? What do each of you think? Can you give a very brief answer to that, each of you, please? Dr. Laurence.
So I know that in European countries it is starting to go that way. I know that in the start of this year, countries such as the Netherlands have implemented any kind of device, like an Apple Watch, nothing in schools, so that at least for 7 hours they aren't exposed. And so many of the countries are going that way. France is cracking down really hard. They're saying 0 hours until the age of 3, and it's the governments that are implementing.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Anand, what do you think?
Same, as Dr. Laurence said, that most of the Scandinavian countries as well as the countries, they are spending more time with their parents as well as their grandparents. But now they used to decrease significantly. They glued to the TV, and parents are also involved in doing their office work or other activities. So they made a rule that 0 hours screen time before age of 3 years. Actually, it's published a few months back only, right, Dr. Laurence? Yeah. I think it's in the August, September 2024, they made a rule. They definitely made a rule that there should not be any screen time, because the emotional bonding is decreasing. The interaction between parents has been decreased. There are consequences. They are facing so much tantrums among the children. Already, this type of countries means already they are facing so many problems. So they don't want to get involved in many other emerging problems to their children. Children is the future of the country. They are build nation. Ultimately, they will become someone, sportsman and intellectual man as well as member of parliament. So that they should have a very, very big and stout brain structure among them.
So Taiwan has taken it, I think, to the extreme where it's 3 hours for the week and you get fined.
Wow.
If you overdo it.
I did not know that.
Right.
Incredible. Ms. Charmaine, anything to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I understand where Sylvia is going with this, and when we talked about it during our planning meeting in terms of, the idea of cell phones being allowed in schools. Why is that even happening, right? We are a very small country. There's no reason why our schools can't really crack down on that concept of no technology at schools. It's as simple as that, right? And so there's a lot of rationale behind it, in that this is easier to get a hold of your parents when needed. But before we had access to that, how did we do things? Right? So some of it is just convenience and really and truly irresponsibility. Right? We've talked about also at a policy level what can be done. We have our anti-bullying policy. Some of it does cover cyberbullying. We have our ICT law that also covers the misuse of technology. So there are parameters in place. And to Sylvia's question around if it is a child safeguarding issue, if as a professional you truly believe and you have suspicion to believe that a child is being neglected, whether it is physical, whether it is just plain out, physical abuse or just blatant neglect, and you have, the impact of it developmentally, this child is not meeting their milestone, we have that responsibility to file that report and to report it to the correct authorities. So it's not a matter of having it explicitly written somewhere, but it's also our moral responsibility and our duty to support where needed.
Thank you so much. Ms. Charmaine, Dr. Anand, Dr. Laurence, thank you so very much for shedding an incredibly important light on this topic and bringing your expertise to this. Thank you.
Thank you.